Look, he's blushing.
Seriously? Okay.
Hello and welcome to Road to Recovery, the show that attempts to offer hope and help and healing and wholeness to those who are struggling with addiction, or maybe a family member or friend or coworker, a neighbor that is also struggling with addiction or has a loved one that is on this journey as well. We so appreciate you joining us. If you've got a need, a question, a comment, a concern, contact the Recovery Center, 740-687-4500. Also, you can stop by the Recovery Center at their new facilities, 201 South Columbus Street in downtown Lancaster. I'm Steve Rao, and I have the privilege of co-hosting this with Tarisha Farrar. She's the Executive Director of the Recovery Center. Unfortunately, she's not able to be with us today, and so we will look forward to having her with us the next time. Our guest today is the Community Education Coordinator for the Recovery Center, and she is Jennifer Blackston. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much for having me, Steve.
It's a pleasure to have you with us here today to talk about something that is very important to you and to us here on the program, and that is the stigma of addiction. Before we get to that, give me a little bit of Jennifer Blackston background. Where did you get your education?
I went to OU and have a degree in communication and psychology. I actually volunteered for the Recovery Center that at the time was with the Division of Alcoholism.
Okay.
And then it developed into the Drug and Alcohol Recovery Center and then eventually the Recovery Center. But I volunteered for about longer than that, probably about 10 years before I was able to get a job doing prevention, which is my passion, in preventing people from becoming dependent, preventing kids from having problems, whether it's dependency or other abuse, other use issues. So that's always been kind of my thing. So I volunteered there for about 10 years, and I've been with the company since for about 16 or 17 years.
You obviously have a heart for those who are going through this struggle to be willing to volunteer for 10 years and then kind of working that into a position where you can do that maybe on a full-time basis. You talk about prevention. We'll talk about stigmas primarily here today, but what do you say to those in the community as the best approach to prevent somebody from going down this road to addiction so they don't have to go on the road to recovery?
Very good question. Studies show that the best thing that can be done is to have a parent who actually says, don't do it. It's as simple as that,
yeah.
But it's not actually what happens. What we tend to do is bargain with them. You know, it's okay for you to drink, but make sure you only drink in my house, or make sure you only drink what I've given you, or which is illegal.
Correct.
Yeah, but we tend to want to bargain with them. We tend to want to think, well, they're going to do it anyway, so why don't we just go ahead and let them do it in our house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And that ends up causing a lot more problems. We do find that if kids were to not use at all until the age of 21, it is almost impossible for them to eventually become addicted to anything. That when they start using before the age of 15, they're 4 to 5 times more likely to develop a problem. That's one reason why prevention in early years is so important.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that. And part of that is codependency, isn't it? The parents are a big part of the problem and really kind of creating this addiction habit and this pattern for them.
Absolutely. And as a parent, it's tough not to want to do things. When we talk about codependency, that basically means caring more for other people's needs than for myself or for yourself. It's great that we're taking care of people when our kids are very young. We have to do that.
Certainly.
But as they get older, when we start putting their needs above our own basic needs, then that gets to be a problem and unhealthy. When we're in a relationship that is codependent, that means that I value that person and that relationship relationship more than I do myself. So me calling that person off for work, or making excuses for that person, or writing a letter to school, or whatever it is starting to overwhelm my life, and that's more important to me than just taking care of me and making sure that you get enough sleep and making sure that you eat and making sure that you do just the basics. Sometimes that stuff gets put by the wayside, and that is codependency. That is being more dependent on the person than on yourself.
And that is a bad place to be.
That is a bad place to be.
We must take care of ourselves. The beautiful thing, especially about this program, is there's people like Jennifer Blackston and others at the Recovery Center who will come alongside and help you to be able to help yourself, to be where you want to be happy, to be healthy, to be whole, and to be healed. And so we appreciate your willingness to do that.
Yes, and we actually, a lot of people will ask me, usually not in front of everyone, now a lot of that has to do with the stigma.
Sure.
But a lot of people will say, well, what can I do to help someone who I'm concerned about?
Yep.
The number one thing we say to do is to help yourself. Because until you've helped yourself, and until you've become educated on what's going on, and until you know that these behaviors are allowing it to continue, then they're going to keep using because they don't see a problem. What's the problem? Because, so-and-so called me off from work and
Right.
I didn't get written up,
Right.
or so-and-so made this excuse and I didn't get in trouble.
Right.
They don't see the problem because we're making sure that we cover that problem.
Right. A bad idea. Let's expose the problem so that we can address the problem. One of the problems with exposing the problem is this idea of stigma. When you say, oh, I'm an addict, or I struggle with alcoholism, or I'm having a little trouble with drugs, all of a sudden people paint you in a particular light. How do you address those stigma issues?
Right. But think about a Christmas season or a family event where, someone says that maybe they have cancer. What do? How do we take care of that? We talk about, diagnosis and what that means and what we need to do and who can help this person and who's going to take this person to appointments, how we can aid this person. Do you need this? Do you need a bed? Do you need someone to hold your hand? We talk about all kinds of ways that we can help people with the disease of cancer, or,
Sure.
or heart disease, or asthma, or diabetes. We talk about all kinds of things that we can do. But when a person is diagnosed with an addiction, which is a disease of the brain, we don't want to talk about it. They don't usually tell us about it. And if they do tell us about it, we don't know what to do with that information. We're completely clueless. And this is where, you can certainly call us, and there's lots of different places that you can go for help. But it's hard to get through those doors. It's very difficult to get through the doors just mentally, to think, going here means that I might have a problem. And having a problem might mean that I'm like those people that I see in the movies.
Right.
And the people that I have in mind are the people who I see in TV, the people who I have in my own mind. We do, I ask a lot, what kind of person do you think is most likely to become addicted? And most of the responses are, a person who is poor, a person who doesn't take care of themselves, a person who doesn't have the education that they want, a person who, lives under a bridge and drinks from the brown paper bag. That is not true at all, but that is what we have in mind. The reason why we have that in mind is because that is the addiction. That's not the way they started.
Correct.
But sometimes at the end, that's where they are. It's hard to hold down a job when you're dealing with an addiction, depending upon what it is, because absolutely some people can. It's hard to keep the family intact. It's hard to get the education and all that stuff. So we have this certain thing in mind, and we don't want to be that thing. And if we walk through those doors, or if a person allows their kid to walk through those doors, or their husband or their wife, then that's saying, you know what, I failed, and this is a moral failing. And it's not. It absolutely is not. It is a brain disease. Some people are more likely to get it than others.
Correct.
Depending upon their biology, and depending upon how much they drink and how often they drink and how much they use and how often they use. The same thing, of course, I'm sure you've talked about prescription medication. Many people start with legitimate prescription use,
Sure.
and end up being addicted. And then they move on to something that they can afford because their bodies are saying, I need this and I need this now.
Right. Yeah, I had that situation happen to me. A friend of mine who I knew for a couple of years, interacted with them, did activities with them. Our kids played together. And about 2 years after that, they called me and said, I have a situation, and I've had a problem with alcoholism, and I meant to tell you 2 years ago, but I never did. What prevented my friend from saying, Steve, I have an alcohol problem. I like you, we were friends, we do things together, but I didn't want to tell you. What prevented him from telling me?
The shame. The shame.
Yeah.
I actually wrote down some words that we use when we're talking about addiction because I can't think of them all because I've trained myself to not think of them.
Sure.
But when we're talking about a person who is addicted, we talk about a junkie, we talk about an abuser, we talk about a user, an addict. That person is an addict versus, if a person had cancer or heart disease, we wouldn't say that they are their disease,
No,
right?
they would say a person that has cancer.
Exactly.
Not a person that has an addiction. They're an addicted person.
Right. Yeah, but we call them an addict,
right.
An abuser,
right.
An alkie, an alcoholic, a person who has a drug habit, meaning that they can stop at any time if they want,
because
it's just a habit,
just
right?
quit doing it.
That it's reckless use, that we get dirty or clean tests. There's all kinds of words out there that we don't even notice, that we use and that media uses, that we see all the time. So with that perception and with the things that we see in media, the fact that we're not talking about it, that the people who do use, or the people who, are in recovery, are not talking about it because of all that stigma again.
Right.
So we've got lots of people who are wonderful, upstanding individuals within our community, throughout the world, but they don't talk about their addiction. Once it's done, they might talk a little bit, you might see something from someone who's pretty famous. You might see something in the news,
sure.
and you see all some of the terrible stuff, but we don't talk about what's happened after that. We don't talk about the wonderful things and how recovery is. Our opinion is just that addiction and the problems that can come with that.
Interesting. Somebody has diabetes. My niece was just diagnosed with diabetes. The family talked about it. She has to take shots. She has to adjust her diet. It's no big deal. We can talk about that, but we don't want to talk about the fact that somebody has alcohol addiction or drug addiction. And what can we as a society do to break that stigma so that people that are having this struggle can be open about it, knowing that there's people that will come along and help them?
First of all, the words that we use are really important. Talking about them as a person with an addiction versus an addict are two very different things. Looking at how we can help them, getting help for people around them, talking about it is huge. There are times I've often talked about the fact that with the heroin epidemic that's happening nationwide, that as much as it's been really a big pain and a big thorn in our side, it's gotten people to talk. And it's gotten people to talk to me from a recovery standpoint that would not have done that before. So being able to talk about it, when that niece talked, mentioned that she had diabetes, or her parent mentioned that she had diabetes, we talked about it, right?
Correct.
Versus when someone says we have alcoholism, well, what do we give them for Christmas? Are we allowed to have alcohol at the party? Or, and we talk in hushed tones. We don't even discuss it. But
correct.
And knowing that it's a disease, and also being able to tell. To talk to the individual who's dealing with the addiction about the disease, and how can I help you? Just being there and being willing to ask questions and not be so hush-hush about it is huge.
It certainly is. With the cancer diagnosis analogy, you say, I'm really sorry that you have this disease, that you have this problem. Exactly. We can do that with those who are struggling with addiction. I'm sorry that you have this challenge. What can we do to come alongside and help you? We're just about out of time. What can the Recovery Center do to help those individuals who are struggling with addiction?
Education is really important. Education around the people who are dealing with addiction. Now, of course, we deal with people who are addicted, but we also deal with their family members and their people in significant relationships with them. We find that to be a great place to get them help. And also it's great to get that education so that you feel a little less of that stigma that we're talking about.
Begins to break the stigma. Great work that you're doing, Jennifer Blackston. We appreciate you coming on the Road to Recovery show. Thank you for the work you're doing. Keep up the great work and helping us as a community to break this stigma so more people can get the help they need.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this Road to Recovery show. Give the Recovery Center a call, 740-687-4500, if you would like some information on how to break the stigma in your family or in your community. Or stop by 201 South Columbus Street and visit the Recovery Center. Join us next time as we continue to journey down this road to recovery.
thanks for coming.
Are we in trouble?
No, you're not in trouble. I just want to set some ground rules.
Like what?
Well, remember last week when you hit Vinny in the head with the shovel?
I do not recall that.
Of course not. Well, it was pretty graphic. Too graphic for the kids. So I'm gonna have to block you.
You know, I gotta make this up to you. This is Vinny's watch, and I want you to have it. You deserve
No,
it.
thank you. That's really not necessary.
No, come here.